Okay, so I have the sort of boring task of talking about things that's not instructional related. But we've been piloting for almost a year now, really, some new video streaming techniques for, as you know, we've been using Windows Media Video for a long time, which is like, celebrating 25 years or something like that of video streaming. It's been around a while. But, and of course, it's not very compatible with mobile devices and those sorts of things. And we're trying really hard to get our recordings that stream accessible to those other devices. A lot of times if somebody wants it because they're traveling with work and they want the portability, we end up having to take extra steps for downloads and those sorts of things. And a lot of times professors prefer not to have that be the case with downloads and that sort of thing. And so this sort of helps with that. And it just helps in general that they have more options in terms of accessibility for being able to watch those recordings instead of being restricted to a desktop or a laptop computer. So it used to just be that we just were computer based with our recordings, and I guess to some degree it still is that way, except for the pilot that we're running with Kaltura. But eventually, of course, we're going to. The goal is to have a solution that will then be accessible from phones, tablets, and even TVs, because of course TVs now you can buy smart TVs or smart Blu-ray players or gaming consoles. With this particular streaming solution, I can actually at home pull up my Xbox, launch their browser, and start watching a course, which is pretty incredible to have it there on full screen on your TV in your living room, which TVs are massive now. And it's pretty interesting to be able to have that ability to do that and that accessibility. And then it sort of leaves you open. If you're taking notes on your laptop, you can be watching it on the TV and taking notes on your laptop or whatever the case. Or if you're having to travel, you're just piggybacking off of McDonald's Wi-Fi on your phone or your tablet or whatever. And it just becomes more accessible that way, but without us having to give it away, so to speak, without us having to go to the download solution to have that flexibility. So that's kind of one of the big reasons, and I kind of wanted to focus on two things today in this very short presentation. And the two things that I would consider to be probably the two most important things when it comes to the streaming video, which would be accessibility. That would probably be number one for students, is that accessibility of the content. And then the other thing being security. And when it comes to the security, that sort of tackles a whole other area that professors are often very concerned about, with their materials just being out there to be shared, being out there to be downloaded, being out there to be chopped and cut out of context and uploaded to YouTube, and then they look really funny because they said something, but out of context it sounded, taking your stuff and pirating it or whatever. And the nice thing about this is it adds extra layers that we didn't really have before. We've been working, basically security now has been kind of we'll put it in Blackboard, and that's kind of nice. But with Windows Media, you're really restricted. What's funny is if you go and search for Windows Media logos, you just get these really old ones. Like I couldn't find like a newish looking Windows Media logo, so I went with that one. But Windows Media just did not allow much by way of security. It just never was all that something that we could really lock down in terms of keeping people from getting a copy of it or being able to share the link and that sort of thing. And so that's one thing with Kaltura that helps a lot, is we're able to secure it down a lot more, whereas with WinMedia it was a lot more accessible and a lot more shareable, easily stolen, so to speak. And I kind of always have this feeling of that when it comes to internet security or whatever, is that if one man built the security, another man could break it. So it's really just a matter of how many loopholes do you want people to jump through to get to it. Do you want it to be super easy so that just any old person that's not tech savvy at all could easily steal it, or do you want to make it a little hard, make somebody have to hack to get it, or that sort of thing? But there's really no such thing as completely secure. If it's on the web, it's there, But it's certainly a lot more secure than what we've been able to do in the past with Win Media, which is obviously a huge improvement in that regard. But this isn't set in stone. Like I said, we're in a pilot phase, but it is nice that we're kind of trying to get there, and it's looking, it looks positive, in terms of the accessibility and the security and those sorts of things. Just real quick, I thought I'd kind of show you just an example. You appear on so many of our screen captures now, by the way, just saying. But this is just an example of the player, one of the players we've been working with. You may have seen this already if you've had classes with us over the summer, or even in the spring. We had a few classes in the spring that we were testing with. But so this is something that a student would see, whether it might look a little different than this if you're on like a mobile device. The player looks a little bit different, but we're also working to get them to look kind of the same so that it feels the same, in terms of a user experience, so they don't have to learn something new every time they switch devices. But as you can see, there's a bunch of things going on in this. But basically, this is a playlist over here that has all the lectures in it, and we'll get to that. But this here is part of this. I shouldn't do that. Right here where it says auto, this is a menu just like you'd see on YouTube where you have that little gear. You click that, it pops up, and you have different quality settings. So if you're on a pretty bad bandwidth connection, you're going to want to go down kind of low. If you're just in Kansas City rocking Google Fiber, you're going to want to crank it up. You're going to say, don't give me this nonsense, I'm ready. But and so it starts out on auto, which means it'll change. They call that adaptive streaming. But basically, it'll change on its own based on what your internet's doing at the time. But they also have the ability to click that menu and change it. Like if they know their internet connection is really bad, they're probably just going to click the lowest one and say, I'm not going anywhere else but there, so thanks. But and that really low one is something we've been playing with a lot over the past, really since we started the HD resolutions for our video. We've been playing with some really low bit rates so that people can stream it all around the globe, no matter what their internet connections. And so that's really important to us to make sure we always have that really low one. It's still in HD resolution, so the content on the slides is crisp, but the bit rate's so low that it runs on just about any connection, or on a lot of connections, I should say. It's rare when we find somebody that can't get one. I think there was one time student I was working with over test week trying to get streaming working, and his whole thing was he was on this site in the middle of nowhere, and he's like, we have this little mobile home and there's a satellite and it doesn't work all that well and it drops and all this stuff. And I'm like, yeah, we're probably going to want to figure something out. In my mind, I'm picturing like The Thing, where they're trapped out there in the middle of nowhere and the alien starts attacking and nonsense. But so there's rare situations when the internet's pretty bad, pretty choppy, where it's not going to matter at that point, and then there's going to have to be some, we try to go out of our way, to make sure that they can get it somehow. But this funky little square button, that just says that it can go full screen, which we're all kind of used to with YouTube. So you can pop it out of that little window in the web page and go full screen and look at it full screen. Again, this is just a playlist, so as the class progresses, the newest class is at the top and the older classes are at the bottom. And when you first load it, the first one that loads here is going to be the latest class. And so then they have the ability to just go up and down and move through the classes very, very easily through the lectures. Okay, I told you it was going to be fast. I wanted to be fast because I figured there might be more questions than me going on. So.
Is everything on Kaltura now?
This fall, I guess this summer, we ran like all 9 or 10 of our summer classes on it. Okay. This fall, we're going to run all of our classes on it as well. Windows Media will still be there, and the WebEx recordings will still be there. So we're kind of doing 3 things, whereas before we used to do 2 things. But it's because if it fails miserably this fall, we want to make sure we've got everything there, so everybody's covered.
Yeah, I didn't get a single complaint this summer about access.
Really?
Yeah, and I have lots of people that are, they're engineers that are traveling. That's real common in the geotechnical world. They're always out on field sites.
And
we had a couple students in Saudi Arabia were able to watch all of it.
That's cool.
That's
Well,
great.
our feedback's been, you never get as much feedback as you want, which is always frustrating. You know, you're like constantly reminding them, go look at it and tell us what you think, you know, because you want to know, because you want to make sure you're making good decisions, you know, that they're getting something that works.
Who should we direct
But-
it to over there when we get questions? I mean, is there somebody specifically that I should give them the
Oh, man.
email?
Me.
It's
Me
always our
and Ross
list,
is always good, and
Yeah,
Roy as well.
VCC help.
But
VCC
you
help,
could
and
always
can
just send
forward
a
it to
VCC
whoever
help.
needs
Oh,
to
okay.
know.
Yeah.
Okay. So just
But yeah.
VCC help, all right.
but
That's your best bet.
the feedback that we have gotten has been fairly positive in terms of people being able to access it from the different devices and in different places. There was one person that, one gal that emailed us and said she was in an airport getting ready to go on a destination and just stuck in the airport. What are you going to do? Pulled out her iPhone and was catching up on class, and so that was pretty cool that I didn't have to just let it sit, you know, for a
They
week.
can't get it on iPhones right now then?
Yeah, that with the
Calculus?
Kaltura player, it should work on iOS, Android, Windows devices.
See, before, in order for somebody to watch it on their tablet or their iPhone or something mobile like that, we would have to convert it to an MP4 and then make it downloadable.
Yeah, I always had some of those.
Yes.
For the very reason he's mentioning. So that, and I didn't get those this summer. So that's the Kaltura then, it's a big difference.
Yes.
Okay. All right, well, I appreciate that. That saves me, because I feel bad, and I may be traveling when they're, you know, so that I can always get back to them as fast. Like when they're at abandoned at O'Hare, like you say, they wish they could catch up on 4 hours of classes.
So the asking for permission to download and stuff like that, that's gonna be a thing in the past?
This
is-
Watch
this
it
is
on
not downloadable, this is streamed.
But they can
Now,
watch it on.
Potentially. I mean, if you have scenarios where you've got the guy, you know, where you've got Kurt Russell fighting an alien out there in the snow, and he's got his spotty satellite, or in a more realistic example, you've got somebody over in Afghanistan who only has access to internet once a week, and that one time a week is he needs to download it, pull it off, because he's only on for 10 minutes.
Right.
And then he's going to watch it on his iPod
Right.
for the next week. So it's not going to completely do away with downloads, but to me it will do away with a lot of them. For those people that wanted downloads just because they couldn't access it from those devices, because they were on the road and things like that, you're going to see a lot less of those requests.
Yeah, that's what I didn't see this summer. And
Yeah.
I used to get them every semester. I always get
I
some.
think probably in the future when we get to something like this, it'll be more of a downloads will be sort of a last resort almost sort of thing. If somebody's got a really bad connection or they have some unique scenario where they can't connect all the time. But it'll do away with a lot of it though, I think.
Nathan,
For
are
sure.
there sort of two divisions when it comes to this? The people who wanted to view class on any device, any hardware they had, and then the people that want the downloads are the ones that want to archive it in what they save of their class studies and have it till they're professionals or beyond, and it's sort of a way to keep it at home with them. Is it sort of two different things? When we talk about download,
Yeah,
isn't
when
it?
you talk about downloads, I usually think of there's two types. There's with the way it's been, I need accessibility, and WinMedia and WebEx recording streaming just didn't give a whole lot of accessibility. And then there's the other thing, which is just some scenario where they're not on the internet that much, or whatever, that sort of case, where it's sort of I have to have it almost scenario. Otherwise, I'm not going to be able to be on here for 2.5 hours streaming and at work. It's possible there's some students that use it that way. I don't know that I've actually
there's
heard
really
of it.
three,
But
yeah.
that could be a third option where
Yeah.
students do like having that for sure.
Yeah, I post